A housekeeper, Tina Strader, 46 years old, known for being really dedicated, warm even.
You know, she discovers something horrific. It shifts completely, doesn't it? From just a normal workday to, well,
It really
this.
does. And that contrast, that's kind of chilling in itself. We want to explore how Tina's body was actually found, look into the motel's own pretty unsettling history.
And the perpetrator, Stephen Havrelka, get into his background a bit.
Yes, and then the crime scene itself, the details are quite harrowing. So let's start right at the beginning with the discovery.
It kicked off with her husband, didn't it? He got concerned, couldn't reach her. That initial worry turning into something much, much darker.
Yeah, can you imagine? Those unanswered calls, he eventually goes to the motel himself.
And that's when the awful truth comes out. Finding her hidden in a guest room closet.
That detail, hiding the body,
Yeah.
it feels so deliberate,
Mhm.
cold, like trying to make her disappear.
It does. And it turns out this motel, the Roadway Inn, it wasn't exactly a stranger to tragedy or violence. It had its own dark past.
Oh, absolutely. This wasn't just some random awful thing happening in an otherwise peaceful place. There was a history there, a pretty disturbing one.
It seems like the place itself had sort of accumulated this weight.
Definitely. If you go back, way back to 1980, room 8, there was a murder, a homeless drifter,
The description is brutal, gutted with a blunt object.
and the truly bizarre, horrifying part, he was found nailed to the floor, just his shoes nearby.
Yeah.
It's hard to even process that image.
And nobody was ever arrested for that. It just went cold.
Exactly. Unsolved. Think about what that does to a place, you know? That kind of unresolved violence hanging in the air.
It leaves a mark, a sense of unease, maybe. Questions that never get answered.
And then, much more recently, just 3 years before Tina's murder, room 13, that room got closed permanently.
After a guest allegedly committed suicide in a really horrific way. The report mentioned clawing their own face off, linked to meth and amphetamine abuse, I think.
Yeah. Even with the drug connection, the sheer horror of it is staggering. And happening relatively close in time to Tina's death.
It does suggest a pattern or at least a recurrence of, well, extreme distress and violence within those walls.
And then there's the alleged instruction from the owner to the staff about that incident in room 13.
Right, basically. Pretend it never happened. Don't tell new employees. It was cheaper that way, apparently.
Cheaper. Wow. It raises questions, doesn't it? About responsibility, about acknowledging the history of a place, even the dark parts.
It really does. Like trying to paper over something that's maybe seeping through the cracks anyway.
Okay, so let's shift focus to the man identified as responsible for Tina's death, Stephen Havrilka.
He was a guest at the motel at the time, worked as a mechanic.
And the account suggests he had, well, a temper, a history of issues.
Yeah, reports of being fired from jobs, including one incident involving a tire iron, points towards volatility, maybe trouble controlling anger.
And not just anger, but also this sense of, like, disorganization around him, dropping money frequently, things like that.
It sounds minor, maybe, but sometimes those small details paint a picture of someone's general state, perhaps their level of internal chaos or lack of control.
It could suggest impulsivity, maybe? A lower frustration threshold?
Possibly. And then there's the concrete evidence, the surveillance footage.
Undeniable. It shows him going into the room Tina was cleaning, and then leaving not long after.
And the autopsy confirmed the cause of death. Brutally beaten, strangled, left gagged, unconscious. She died later in the hospital.
The violence is just extreme. Gagging her. That feels particularly cruel. Silencing her.
It implies a terrifying level of intent, preventing any cry for help.
Then there's this other layer of information attributed to an Alex in the account about Havrilka's past.
Yes, a history of violent crime. Prior convictions. He'd actually pleaded guilty to second-degree murder before.
Received a life sentence, but was released and came back to the area.
Exactly. Released and returned. Imagine how unsettling that must have been for people who knew his history.
Absolutely. And the motive for Tina's murder remains unclear. Authorities apparently suspected it was just a violent urge. No robbery, nothing else obvious.
That lack of a clear why is often the most chilling part. It confronts you with the possibility of violence just for its own sake, driven by something internal and unpredictable.
It really does. Okay, let's brace ourselves and talk about the crime scene itself. The details are stark. They paint a picture of her final struggle.
It's difficult, but important to understand. The bloody handprints on the wallpaper.
Starting near the bathroom door, moving towards the closet. It's such a visceral image, isn't it? Her trying to get away, trying to find safety.
You can almost trace her movements, her desperation. The variations in the prints, some clearer, some smeared, they might show her weakening, the progression of the attack.
And the walls themselves, described as having these dried, rust-colored streaks on the white paint. It suggests the struggle wasn't quick. It was prolonged.
There was resistance. And that small detail, the cracked ceramic soap dish on the bathroom floor, bloodied.
It hints that maybe she tried to defend herself, right? Grab whatever was nearby, even if it wasn't enough.
A desperate, instinctive act of self-preservation.
Forensics confirmed the handprints were Tina's. It just anchors that narrative of her fight.
But the spacing of the prints is also noted as irregular, sometimes too high, sometimes too low.
Which raises that awful possibility. Was she being dragged? Pulled towards the closet?
It certainly suggests she may not have been moving entirely under her own power at that point, adding another layer of horror to it.
And then near the closet, the handprints just stop. Abruptly.
Replaced by that large smear arsing onto the closet door itself.
The description implies this final, awful moment, like a crushing motion against the door as she was forced inside. You can almost feel the violence in that description.
It's a chilling punctuation mark to her struggle, the moment she was likely completely overpowered.
And then, inside the closet, finding her body, contorted, shoved amongst cleaning supplies.
Just horrific, and the detail about her fingers curled, as if she was still reaching for the door handle.
Oh, that's heartbreaking. That last, unconscious effort, maybe. The will to escape, even then.
It speaks volumes about the human survival instinct, doesn't it? Persisting even in the very last moments.
And the pooled blood on the floor beneath her, in that small, confined space, it emphasizes the isolation, the finality.
And the silence described in the room afterward, broken only by a flickering ceiling light. It creates this incredibly eerie atmosphere.
Like the space itself is holding its breath, marked by what happened.
Which leads to that comment from the detective, feeling like the walls themselves were trying to breathe.
Yeah, as if the motel, the structure itself, had somehow absorbed the violence. It's a powerful, unsettling image.
It really makes you think about place and memory, doesn't it? Especially with violent trauma. Can a space hold on to that? Does it affect how we perceive it?
So, to kind of wrap up this really difficult deep dive, we've covered the tragic murder of Tina Strader, a life just brutally cut short.
We looked into the Roadway Inn's own unsettling history, this pattern of darkness.
Explored the perpetrator, Stephen Havrilka, his violent past, the seemingly absent motive.
And confronted those harrowing details at the crime scene, the evidence of Tina's final, desperate fight for her life.
It leaves you thinking, doesn't it, about how the weight of past events, like those at the Roadway Inn, can almost seem to linger in a place.
Yeah, how it might influence our feelings about it, create the sense of unease, maybe even contribute to it. What does all this tell us, really, about violence and how it echoes, how it leaves a lasting impact not just on people, but maybe on places, too?
It's a heavy thought to end on. Something for you, the listener, to consider the hidden stories and the shadows that places might hold.